Now we've got Senator Amy Klobuchar. Thanks so much for joining me again today.
Well, thank you, Brian. Great to see you again.
Now, Matt Gaetz has withdrawn from consideration for Attorney General. He's clearly unwilling to subject himself to the vetting process here. So what is the appetite in the Senate to see the ethics report released? And is anything being done to see to it that that happens?
I think there's still an appetite because the public has a right to know. And we have had numerous cases where people have left in the Congress, on the Senate and the House side, and then the ethics report is released. Otherwise, it's just hidden from public view and the subject of all kinds of, as you know, leaks and people and interviews. I do want to say one thing about this, though. There's a reason that we have the Constitution of the United States and that the Senate has a role of advice and consent and that we are not a country of a king or a dictator. It was this very system, the existence of review from the U.S. Senate, and this is really important with what's about to happen with some of these nominees, that actually got him to withdraw his name because of this fact that the Senate was pounding at the door. We were demanding the report, some Republicans, not just Democrats, and we were going to have to recreate the report, sadly, because of the views of some of the House Republicans at taxpayers' expense. They wouldn't give us a report, so we were literally going to have to start interviewing people ourselves. It would have happened, and it still may happen with the release, but this man should never have been nominated for the highest law enforcement job in the United States of America.
And by the way, we may not be certain that his political career is over anyway. What if he wants to run for governor? What if he wants to run for the House again, even though he's resigned this time? Just the fact that he's not in Congress right now, not in front of us right now, doesn't mean that this information won't still be pertinent in the future, especially for someone who has effectively made himself a career politician thus far. Now, you had alluded to this just previously, but Gaetz supporters will say that, okay, the House lost its jurisdiction over him the moment that he resigned. Is there precedent for the Ethics Committee to release findings of a report even if a member is no longer in office?
There is. It happened with regard to a congressman once. It happened with a U.S. senator in just the last few decades. Like, it happens. And there's numerous examples of that. And why do they do it? Well, they feel like they can't hide stuff from the public for the very reason that you mentioned. They feel like it was the public that process that created this report. It wasn't like a private investigator working for a company that looked into something. This is a public report done through publicly elected representatives. So of course it should be released. But I think for us right now, I just think it's really important at a point in time where we have a president-elect who's been just throwing out names and putting out forward anyone that helped him on his campaign. And by the way, often loyalty is a standard for any president. I am not dissing that as a reason you might want to put someone in. It just has to be accompanied by two other things: competency and the ability to do the job, and also a sense of fulfilling the mission of that job and not undermining it. So those are the things I'm going to look at as we look at these future nominees.
Can you take us behind the scenes a little bit? What was the sentiment among your Republican colleagues that this is what they were spending their political capital on in what should have been their honeymoon period, right?
Not good, not good. A lot of people behind the scenes, some of them more out there, Senator Kramer of North Dakota, who is a conservative, said it was a long shot. That was the first day. Senator Murkowski of Alaska, who has a very strong independent streak, voiced concerns. You had Senator Cornyn, a very well-respected member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, asking to see the ethics report. Then you had this series of interviews in the Strom Thurmond room in the U.S. Senate that was where the Republican senators, I wasn't invited, so I didn't see it, but they were brought in by Vice President-elect Gaetz, Vice President-elect Vance, to meet with Matt Gaetz. And then I did hear some of that where it seems like it didn't exactly persuade people. As they were doing these meetings, at the very same time all of these reports were leaking out and information was coming out right blatantly, not even leaking from lawyers of the women involved in many of these incidences of sex for money or other things that had happened.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene had threatened her own party that she would release a raft of damaging information on them about taxpayer-funded payoffs and among other things if those people didn't get on board with Matt Gaetz. So obviously the Matt Gaetz thing fell by the wayside, and yet she still left standing with these claims that all of a sudden there was, again, taxpayer-funded payoffs, and there was a lot of like sexual misconduct going on. So is that to say that it's some poorly kept secret in Washington that House and Senate Republicans have been engaging in this kind of behavior and that there's more to be uncovered?
I don't know. Let's just face it, a lot of what she says does not meet the truth test. That's a very nice Minnesota way of saying it. So I think the bigger issue here is that the Republicans have a small margin in the House. They have a margin big enough to confirm nominees in the Senate. We know that. They are going to have to make their own decisions about this. This isn't to say, Democrats are right now busy, despite some of our members losing. We're there night after night after night, confirming judges and doing our jobs. And now they're going to have a job to do. They're going to have to decide, are they just going to do everything Donald Trump wants and confirm the likes of Matt Gaetz, who eventually had to withdraw his name despite some of them and many of them saying they supported him? Yeah. Are they going to be able to do the job for the American people? Remember, what this is really about, we can talk all this inside Washington, is about getting things done to improve people's lives. It means bringing down the costs of prescription drugs and doing something when it comes to housing and childcare. All these things that a number of them talked about in their campaigns. And the way I look at this, even the nicest analysis of this, is that they are being just distracted and pulled aside by this clown car of things that are happening. And Donald Trump likes to run things with disruption, right? It's kind of catnip for people. And that's what he does. And he did it with Matt Gaetz. He's probably going to do it. We know he's doing it in the future with some of these nominees. And my hope and our job is just to get things done. We're doing this right now while we still control the U.S. Senate to the very last day. Senator Schumer and the rest of us are committed to getting things done. That includes a budget at the end of the year, getting some of these pieces of legislation, bipartisan legislation passed. We're just going to keep doing our jobs. Next year, same thing. And we're going to have to pick our fights because I think some of these people, as you saw from Matt Gaetz, we made our views clear. We weren't shy. We weren't hiding. Yeah. But in the end, they are going to have to decide whether or not they want to have people like Matt Gaetz even be nominated. Or are they going to spend their time running after that, spend day after day meeting with Matt Gaetz, or are they going to actually do the job and work with us on very clear things that need to happen in this country when it comes to economics? That's what the voters want. I know. I just won an election. I know where they are, and they don't want to spend their time swirling around trying to figure out whether or not an ethics report will be released. Let's put some competent people in these jobs.
I'm curious what other nominees now seem especially imperiled since Gaetz is off the table. Like, I'm sure that was sucking up a lot of the oxygen, but who is particularly disturbing now as far as cabinet nominees are concerned, now that all of that attention doesn't have to be on Gaetz?
Well, I think you know that Kennedy, who's been nominated for Health and Human Services. I cannot tell you, just as the Attorney General's office was a leading law enforcement office with 115,000 employees, this job involves people's health. It involves their Medicare. It involves Medicaid. It involves whether or not their grandmas are going to be able to stay in nursing homes, whether or not they're going to be able to afford their insulin. We have a major bill we just passed. It was my legislation on negotiating prices under Medicare, and we've had great progress with blockbuster drugs. The first 10 drugs alone are going to save 9 million people $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket costs in just 1 year. We better put someone highly competent in charge of that agency. The fact that he doesn't believe in vaccines, even pediatric vaccines, put aside COVID vaccines, we know they save lives, but look at for kids. I think this is going to be concerning, but it is all why we have advise and consent
Yeah.
in the Constitution. It's why the Senate has these hearings, and he's been trying to avoid them by claiming, let's do appointments when no one is here. They're called recess appointments. That's a horrible idea. I think we have a number of Republicans standing up against that as well. But it'll be nominee by nominee by nominee. Some of them will not, like Gaetz, make it to the hearings because a few Republicans will most likely stand up and say, not on my watch. Some of them will have the hearings and then things come out and their support wanes and it's done. And then some of them will get to the Senate floor and then we'll see where they are.
Yeah.
I want to stress that I have always been someone who looks for the good. Maybe some of these people won't be my first choice, but I'm sure I'll vote for some of them if I think that they meet my standards of are they qualified for the job and do they respect the mission. I may not agree with them on every single thing they have done or they will do. That's our job. And so we look at each nominee very carefully.
Yeah, and by the way, even from the media perspective, I think it's important to choose our battles here and to figure out which hills are worth dying on, and some just simply aren't. Look, if everything is a five-alarm fire, then nothing is a five-alarm fire. So I do think it's important, even to preserve the fact that our messaging can be effective moving forward, that we figure out where it's most important to focus our energy and our ire on.
Right. And it's really clear when we're going to have these tax reform discussions and you're looking at some of these tax cuts for billionaires, and then you look at regular people who should be able to keep money that they earn and should be able to afford childcare and housing, that's going to be a major battle between the two parties. A 10% tariff across the board, what is that going to do? There are so many major fights that we're going to have that are going to affect people in their everyday lives. Obviously, these nominees do. And so, but I just want to make the point to those that follow you, and you have many, that we need to pick the battles, but in the end, the Republicans are going to have responsibility for this.
Yeah. Let's finish off with this. I want to talk about a rare glimmer of good news here, and that is the judge confirmation process. So what is that looking like right now, especially given Trump's demands that there be no other judges confirmed in this period?
He, believe it or not, can't control what's going on in the Senate because of the fact that the Democrats run the Senate right now. And I cannot tell you the respect I have for my colleagues, people like Sherrod Brown and John Tester, who are, by the way, some of my best friends. I sit in the back row. We've sat there together by choice. And of course, when you sit in the back row with Sherrod Brown, Bob Casey, John Tester, and Chris Coons, we never talk about the other senators as we look down at them. However, those are my buddies. And it was a really tough election year. But to see them come back night after night, the people who didn't win their races just to do the job of America, they could just be home. They could say, I lost. I'm not going to be here in January. I'll come in. I'll work during the day, but I'm not staying till midnight. As we did the other night. I'm not staying till 2 a.m. And believe it or not, it's some of the Republicans that haven't been showing up.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump shamed his own future vice president, J.D. Vance, as well as a number of other Republicans for not showing up in a tweet. So this is going to be interesting. It kind of looks like they already need couples counseling. But that is what's going on. And we have stood up for these judges because if you want to talk about checks and balances, Brian, advice and consent, and that's a check and balance when it comes to nominees for cabinet positions. But another one is the judges, our judiciary. Even during the first Trump administration, it was judges, some of whom had been appointed by conservative Republican presidents like Ronald Reagan, some of whom had been appointed by Donald Trump himself, who were actually a check on some of the really bad things that were going on back then. So I just think the judiciary is really important, and that's why we're prioritizing that. We have confirmed now over 220 judges of high integrity, the vast majority of whom have bipartisan support in the Senate, and we're just going to continue on. We have over a dozen more to do.
Well, we appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you for taking the time today. I appreciate that.
Okay, thanks. It was great to be on, Brian. Thank you.